The discovery the galaxy had known peace for 300 years. The Galactic Council ruled over 47 species, each bound by the Treaty of Stars that banned all weapons of mass destruction. War was a thing of the past, settled through diplomatic channels and trade agreements. Commander Rex of the Altani fleet was conducting routine patrol near the outer rim when his sensors detected something impossible. A massive energy signature was moving through space at incredible speed. The readings showed a vessel unlike anything in the galactic database. "Sir, the ship is enormous," reported his officer Tom. "It's at least 5 kilometers long and covered in what appears to be weapon systems." Rex studied the data with growing alarm. The vessel's hull was dark metal, bristling with gun ports and missile tubes. Strange symbols were carved into its surface. Most disturbing of all, it was heading straight for the core worlds. The ship ignored all communication attempts. It moved with purpose, its engines leaving a trail of exotic particles that made nearby space itself seem to bend. Rex ordered his small patrol fleet to maintain distance while he sent an emergency message to the Council. Within hours, the news spread across the galaxy. A warship of unknown origin was approaching civilized space. The Council convened an emergency session. Species that had not spoken in decades suddenly found themselves united in fear. Admiral Kane of the Viridian Defense Force was placed in command of the response fleet. She gathered ships from 12 different worlds, creating the largest military force seen in centuries. But as they assembled, intelligence reports painted a terrifying picture. The unknown vessel had passed through the neutral zone, where it encountered a pirate fleet. The pirates, thinking they had found easy prey, attacked with everything they had. The warship's response was swift and absolute. It destroyed 27 ships in less than 4 minutes. Using weapons that seemed to tear holes in space itself, Dr. Vale, the Council's chief scientist, studied the recorded footage with trembling hands. "The energy output is impossible," she whispered. "Their weapons are operating on principles we don't understand. They're not just destroying ships, they're unmaking them." The warship continued its approach, now less than 2 days from the first inhabited system. Panic spread through the core worlds as citizens demanded answers their leaders couldn't provide. Where had this vessel come from? What did it want? Captain Ross, a veteran of the border wars, suggested a desperate plan. "We need to evacuate the outer colonies and prepare for siege warfare. This isn't a diplomatic mission, it's an invasion." But Admiral Kane had a different idea. She ordered the fleet to form a defensive line around the planet Nexus, the Council's capital world. If the warship wanted to reach the heart of galactic civilization, it would have to go through them. As the two forces prepared to meet, strange reports began flowing in from long-range scouts. The warship was not alone. Deep space. Sensors detected more signatures, dozens of them, all following the same trajectory. What they had assumed was a single vessel was actually the vanguard of an entire fleet. The realization struck the Council like a physical blow. This was not a rogue ship or desperate refugees. This was a coordinated military operation by an unknown species with technology far beyond their own. General Stone, the Council's military advisor, voiced what everyone was thinking. Who are they? And why haven't we encountered them before? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Nash, an elderly archaeologist, had been studying the symbols on the warship's hull. After hours of analysis, she made a connection that chilled everyone in the room. "I've seen these markings before," she said, her voice barely audible. "They're not alien at all. They're from the Forbidden's archives, from the sealed records of the Lost Worlds." The Lost Worlds were a myth, a cautionary tale told to young species about the dangers of unchecked aggression. According to legend, there had once been a race so violent, so skilled at warfare, that they had been banished from the galaxy itself. But myths, it seemed, had a way of becoming reality. The warship was broadcasting a message now, repeated in dozens of languages. The translation was simple and terrifying. "This is the Earth vessel Titan. We have returned. Prepare for reckoning." The galaxy that had forgotten war was about to remember why their ancestors had been so afraid of the darkness between the stars. Humanity, the species that had been cast out for their violent nature, had spent centuries preparing for this moment. They were coming home, and they were bringing hell with them. First Contact Protocol, the message from the Earth vessel Titan, sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council chambers. Emergency sessions ran day and night as representatives from 47 species tried to process the impossible. Humanity had returned. Director Lisa of the Historical Archives was pulled from her research to brief the Council on everything they knew about the Lost Worlds. The records were fragmentary, deliberately obscured by time and fear. But the basic facts were clear enough to terrify anyone who heard them. Humanity was exiled 400 years ago, she explained to the packed chamber. They were deemed too dangerous to remain in galactic society. The records speak of a species that turned warfare into an art form, that could find tactical advantages in any situation. Fleet Admiral Kane studied the tactical displays, showing the approaching human fleet. 17 ships now, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything in the galactic database. They moved in perfect formation, their course unwavering, toward the core worlds. What did they do that was so terrible? Asked Ambassador Hart of the Centauri delegation. Lisa's face grew pale as she accessed the sealed files. They fought a war against the combined fleets of 5 major powers. Outnumbered 50-1, they won. The records speak of tactics so ruthless, so effective, that the other species united, not to defeat them, but to force them into exile. Captain Ross, now serving as Kane's tactical advisor, pointed to the fleet movements on the display. Look at their formation. They're not just approaching, they're hurting us. Every move we make, they've already anticipated. The human fleet had arrived at the edge of the Nexus system, just outside the range of the defensive grid. They held position there, making no aggressive moves but clearly demonstrating their superior numbers and firepower. Dr. Vale monitored their communications, hoping to find some weakness in their coordination. What she found instead was something that made her blood run cold. They're not just communicating with each other, she reported. They're running combat simulations. Thousands of them. They're calculating every possible battle scenario in real time. The Galactic Council appointed Ambassador Cole to attempt first contact. He was their best diplomat, skilled in the languages and customs of dozens of species. But as he prepared his greeting, he realized he was about to negotiate with beings that had been exiled for being too good at war. That the response came from the Titan's bridge. The human who appeared on screen was unremarkable in appearance. Average height, simple clothing, calm expression. But his eyes held a depth that spoke of centuries of preparation. I am Commander Jack of the Earth Colonial Fleet, he said in perfect galactic standard. We have returned to reclaim what was taken from us. Ambassador Cole tried to maintain diplomatic protocol. We welcome you back to galactic society. Perhaps we can discuss terms for your peaceful reintegration. Jack's smile was polite but cold. Peaceful reintegration assumes we want to integrate. We've spent 4 centuries learning to live without you. We've also spent that time learning to fight without rules. The transmission cut to tactical displays showing human technology in action. Weapons that could punch through shields like paper. Armor that could withstand direct hits from fusion cannons. Ships that moved with an agility that defied physics. You exiled us because we were too good at war, Jack continued. What you didn't consider was what we might become with 400 years to perfect our craft. General Stone watched the displays with growing horror. They've turned warfare into a science. Every weakness we have, they've already identified and countered. The human fleet began to move, not toward the defense grid, but around it. They were demonstrating their ability to bypass the fixed defenses entirely, to strike at the soft targets behind the lines. Dr. Nash, still working on the archaeological data, made another disturbing discovery. The symbols on their ships aren't just decorative. They're tactical markings. Each one represents a different type of warfare they've mastered. Admiral Kane realized the truth with growing dread. They're not here to conquer us. They're here to show us how easily they could. The human fleet completed its demonstration and returned to its holding position. Commander Jack's final transmission was simple. We will establish a colony in the outer rim. You will not interfere. Any attempt to stop us will be met with appropriate force. The Council faced an impossible choice. They could fight beings who had spent centuries perfecting the art of war, or they could allow humanity to establish a foothold in galactic space. Either way, the age of galactic peace was over. The Siege of Nexus. The Galactic Council's decision to refuse humanity's demands came after 7 days of heated debate. Ambassador Cole cast the deciding vote, believing that giving in to the humans would set a dangerous precedent. The galaxy would not bow to exiled warmongers, no matter how advanced their technology. The human response was swift and terrifying. Commander Jack's face appeared on every screen in the HFY Sci-Fi system simultaneously. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had shifted. You have chosen poorly, he said simply. We offered you coexistence. You have chosen war. The human fleet moved with mechanical precision. In less than 6 hours, they had established a complete blockade around the Nexus system. No ship could enter or leave without passing through their perimeter. Fleet Admiral Kane watched helplessly as her defensive strategies crumbled. The humans didn't attack the fortified positions or engage the main fleet. Instead, they struck at the support infrastructure. Supply convoys disappeared without trace. Communication relays went dark. Maintenance stations simply vanished. They're not trying to destroy us, reported Captain Ross from the command center. They're trying to make us destroy ourselves. Dr. Vale monitored the systematic dismantling of the system's defenses. They're using minimal force for maximum effect. Every strike is precisely calculated to cause the greatest disruption with the least effort. The siege entered its second week with no shots fired between the main fleets. But the effects were becoming clear. Food shipments couldn't reach the outer colonies. Medical supplies were running low. The carefully balanced ecosystem of Galactic civilization was being methodically dismantled. General Stone proposed a desperate gambit. We have to break the blockade. If we can punch through their lines and reach the core worlds, we can rally the other fleets. Admiral Kane authorized the attempt. The combined fleet, nearly 300 ships strong, made a coordinated push toward the human perimeter. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The humans didn't meet the charge head-on. Instead, they let the galactic fleet commit to the attack, then struck from unexpected angles. Ships that had appeared to be out of position suddenly revealed themselves to be perfectly placed for flanking maneuvers. The battle lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it was over, the galactic fleet had lost 60% of its ships. The human fleet hadn't lost a single vessel. Commander, Jack's post-battle transmission was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. We didn't want this war. You forced it upon us. But since you insist on fighting, we'll show you what 4 centuries of military evolution looks like. The true horror began with the 3rd week. The humans launched what they called demonstration attacks against military targets throughout the galaxy. These weren't attempts at conquest. They were lessons in human warfare. A fortified base on the planet Krios fell in 12 minutes. The humans used a combination of tactics that bypassed every known defense. They didn't just win. They made victory look effortless. Dr. Nash, still analyzing human tactics, made a chilling discovery. They're not using their best weapons. These demonstration attacks are being carried out with what appears to be their standard equipment. They're holding their advanced systems in reserve. The psychological impact was devastating. Species that had lived in peace for centuries suddenly found themselves facing enemies who had spent that same time perfecting the art of war. Panic spread through the core worlds as citizens demanded their leaders find a way to end the conflict. Ambassador Cole attempted to reopen negotiations, but the humans' terms had changed. They no longer wanted just a colony in the Outer Rim. They wanted recognition as the galaxy's military authority. They wanted control of all defense forces. They wanted to restructure galactic society according to their vision. "You created us," Commander Jack explained during one tense negotiation. "You exiled us because we were too good at war. We spent 4 centuries becoming even better. Now you want us to pretend we're not what you made us." The siege of Nexus continued. Into its 4th week, the humans demonstrated their ability to sustain indefinite operations, while the galactic forces struggled with supply shortages and morale problems. Captain Ross, studying the human fleet movements, noticed something that chilled him to the bone. They're not just holding position. They're building something. Those aren't just warships. They're construction vessels. The humans were establishing permanent infrastructure in the Nexus system. They weren't planning to leave after winning the war. They were planning to stay and reshape galactic civilization according to their own design. The age of human dominance was beginning, and the galaxy was powerless to stop it. The fall of Titans, the revelation that humans were building permanent installations in the Nexus system, sent shockwaves through the remaining free worlds. What had begun as a siege was transforming into an occupation. The humans weren't just winning the war, they were preparing to rule the galaxy. Director Lisa discovered the truth while analyzing intercepted human communications. The Earth colonial fleet wasn't just a military force. It was a complete colonization operation. Ships that had appeared to be pure warships were actually mobile cities, carrying millions of humans in cryogenic suspension. They never intended to just establish a colony, she reported to the emergency council session. They're planning to remake the entire galaxy in their image. Admiral Kane studied the latest intelligence reports with growing despair. The human construction vessels were building something massive in the asteroid belt surrounding Nexus. Energy readings suggested it was some kind of super weapon, but the design was unlike anything in galactic records. Dr. Vale intercepted fragments of human technical data that painted a terrifying picture. They're not just building weapons. They're building infrastructure for permanent settlement. Orbital habitats, manufacturing facilities, defensive platforms. They're planning to stay. The galactic resistance was fragmenting. Some species wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. Others proposed increasingly desperate military solutions. The unity that had once bound the galaxy together was crumbling under the pressure of human psychological warfare. Commander Jack's daily broadcasts had become a form of torture. He would calmly explain human capabilities, demonstrate new weapons, and offer increasingly harsh terms for surrender. Each broadcast made it clear that the humans were barely exerting themselves. "Today we tested our Mark 7 plasma cannons," he announced during one particularly chilling demonstration. "As you can see, they can vaporize a moon-sized target in approximately 30 seconds. These are our training weapons. Would you like to see our combat systems?" Captain Ross proposed a desperate plan to the remaining military leaders. "We need to find their weakness. Every species has limitations. Even the humans must have something they can't account for. Asterisk, the answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Nash, while studying human tactical patterns, noticed something odd. Despite their overwhelming superiority, the humans were being incredibly careful to minimize casualties. They destroyed ships and infrastructure, but they went to extraordinary lengths to avoid killing actual people. They're not monsters, she realized. They're still human. They have moral constraints we can exploit. The plan that emerged was as desperate as it was morally questionable. The Galactic forces would use civilian shields, forcing the humans to choose between military objectives and innocent lives. It was a violation of every principle of civilized warfare, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The operation began at dawn on the 32nd day of the siege. Civilian transport ships, loaded with refugees, were sent toward the human perimeter. The plan was to force the humans to let them pass, creating gaps in their blockade. Commander Jack's response was immediate and devastating. You have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. We offered you honorable defeat. You have chosen to hide behind innocence. The human fleet reconfigured itself within hours. Instead of the loose blockade they had maintained, they formed a tight, defensive sphere around their construction sites. Any ship that approached was boarded and searched. Civilians were separated from military personnel with ruthless efficiency, but the real shock came when the humans revealed what they had been building. It wasn't a weapon at all. It was a massive communication array. The energy readings that had seemed so threatening were actually the power requirements for a galaxy-wide broadcast system. Commander Jack's final transmission reached every inhabited world simultaneously. We returned to find a galaxy that has forgotten the lessons of war. You live in peace because others paid the price for that peace. You have grown soft, complacent, and ultimately helpless. The broadcast showed images of human worlds beyond the galactic rim, cities that spanned continents, fleets that dwarfed anything in known space. Billions of humans who had spent centuries building a civilization based on strength and preparation. We are not your enemies, Jack continued. We are your successors. The galaxy you built was weak, divided, and ultimately doomed. We offer you a choice. Join us in building something stronger, or be swept aside by the forces you can no longer comprehend. The human ultimatum was simple. The Galactic Council would be dissolved. The various species would be reorganized under human authority. Peace would be maintained not through diplomacy, but through overwhelming strength. The vote was unanimous. Every species chose survival over pride. The age of galactic democracy was over. The age of human hegemony had begun. The new galactic order 6 months after the siege of Nexus. The galaxy bore little resemblance to the peaceful confederation it had once been. The human colonial administration had replaced the Galactic Council, and Commander Jack now held the title of Supreme Colonial Governor. The changes were swift and absolute. The old diplomatic protocols were replaced by military efficiency. Trade routes that had taken weeks to negotiate now operated on schedules measured in hours. Conflicts that had simmered for decades were resolved through human arbitration in a matter of days. Director Lisa found herself serving as the Colonial Administration's chief cultural advisor. Her job was to help integrate the various species into the new human-dominated order. The work was challenging, but she had to admit the results were impressive. Crime rates are down 70% across all core worlds, she reported to Governor Jack during their weekly briefing. Trade efficiency has improved by nearly 300%. Most species are adapting better than we expected. The human approach to governance was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Instead of the endless committees and debates that had characterized the old council, decisions were made quickly and implemented immediately. There were no more border disputes because the humans had redrawn all the boundaries according to logical principles. Dr. Vale, now serving as the chief scientific advisor, was amazed by the technological revolution the humans had brought. "They're not just sharing their advanced weapons," she explained to her research team. "They're teaching us completely new approaches to physics, engineering, and biology." The human scientific method was based on practical application rather than theoretical debate. Research projects that had languished for decades under the old system were completed in weeks. The galaxy was experiencing a technological renaissance unlike anything in its history. But the changes went deeper than just politics and technology. The humans were restructuring society itself. Captain Ross, now serving as the colonial security chief, found himself overseeing a law enforcement system that actually worked. "They've eliminated the concept of unsolvable crimes," he reported to his former colleagues. "Every case is approached with military precision. They don't just solve problems, they prevent them from happening in the first place." The human legal system was based on principles of deterrence and rehabilitation rather than punishment. Criminals were either reformed or removed from society entirely. There were no endless appeals or legal loopholes. Justice was swift, certain, and effective. General Stone, who had initially opposed the human takeover, found himself grudgingly impressed by their military reforms. "They've created the most efficient defense force in galactic history. Every species contributes according to their strengths. There's no waste, no duplication, no political interference." The human military doctrine was simple: overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Conflicts were ended before they could begin. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in centuries, but it was a peace enforced by the constant threat of human retaliation. Dr. Nash discovered that the humans had been studying galactic society for the entire 4 centuries of their exile. They had identified every weakness, every inefficiency, every source of conflict. Their takeover wasn't just a military conquest, it was a carefully planned social engineering project. They didn't just want to defeat us, she realized. They wanted to fix us. In their view, we were a broken civilization that needed to be repaired. The human philosophy was based on the idea that peace through strength was the only sustainable form of government. They had created a society where war was impossible, not because everyone agreed, but because the consequences of conflict were too terrible to contemplate. Ambassador Cole, now serving as the Human-Alien Relations Coordinator, had to admit that the new system worked better than the old one. "We've eliminated poverty, ended most diseases, and created a level of stability that the old council could never have achieved, but we've also given up our freedom." Governor Jack's response to such concerns was always the same: freedom without security is chaos. Security without strength is illusion. We offer you both security and strength. The price is obedience. The galaxy had learned to live under human rule. Some species thrived under the new order, finding that human efficiency and military protection allowed them to achieve things they had never dreamed possible. Others mourned the loss of their independence, even as they enjoyed the benefits of human civilization. But all agreed on one thing: the humans had kept their promise. The galaxy was stronger, more prosperous, and more peaceful than it had ever been. The age of human hegemony was not the terror that many had feared. It was something perhaps more unsettling: a benevolent dictatorship that actually worked. The galaxy had been conquered not by force alone, but by the demonstration that human civilization was simply superior in every measurable way. And in the end, that was the most terrifying victory of all. Asterisk.